is the healing of racism. The elimination of racial prejudice is one of the central teachings of our religion. The Baha'i Faith, for those who don't know, started about 150 years ago in the Middle East, in Persia, in Iran. The founder, Baha'u'llah, proclaimed himself to be a new divine teacher, bringing a spiritual healing message for humanity for this day and age. He is in a long line of great spiritual teachers that includes the Buddha, Krishna, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and Baha'is believe he's the most recent of these divine prophets. Baha'is call them manifestations of God. Again, bringing a healing message for the modern world. And as such, one of his main teachings has to do with the elimination of racial prejudice. There are many more, we won't go into them right now. And I'm not able to share screen, and I have a bunch of quotes to share. So,
Rainn, I allowed you to do it. Go ahead.
Oh, look at that! Boom! Thank you. Beautiful. I was talking about my privilege, and I sent out this tweet the other day. Here's another aspect of my privilege, because I can do all of these things without thinking twice about it. These are all actions that African Americans were recently killed while doing in the last couple of years. I can go birding. Well, he wasn't killed, but we saw Christian Cooper confronted by the woman, Amy Cooper, and who called the cops on him and said that he was attacking her. I can go jogging. Unlike George Floyd, I can be arrested without fear of being murdered. I can relax in the comfort of my own home. I can have a cell phone, etc. I can sleep. I can walk home with Skittles, Trayvon Martin. That's just a little perspective. Let deeds, not words, be your adorning, says Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith. There's a lot of talk going on. There's a lot of tweeting and social media. And we as Baha'is are encouraged always to move into action. And the reason I wanted to bring up this quote is one of the deeds that I've been learning about, and something that I've learned this last week or two, is this idea that's been going around and people have been talking about it, where it's not enough anymore for someone to say, I'm not racist. Let's say, I'm not racist. Everyone says they're not racist. Because what's our definition of a racist? Our definition of a racist is like, I hate people of a certain skin color, right? But being a racist can encompass a lot more than that. That it's not enough to say, I'm not racist. What is called upon for our deeds in this day and age have to do with being an active anti-racist. And I forget the name of the author, I have it written down here somewhere, who has this new book that I just got called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And that's what the clarion call of many of our Black and brown brothers and sisters have, is we need white people to speak up and actively be an anti-racist. Another book that I'm currently reading is called White Fragility. And the reason I'm bringing up this book too is I think it's relevant and pertinent to our discussion tonight, because so many people, so many white people get so prickly and defensive when talking about race and when confronted about race. And I've been guilty of that myself many times. I've been guilty of that with Jamey in our discussions. And this book is a wonderful exploration of, like, why is it that white people get so uncomfortable, defensive, and fragile when looking at systemic racism and their own personal role in that. And I remember saying to a relative of mine, talking about race many, many years ago, I think I was a teenager, and this kind of quote that you'll hear a lot was said, which was, well, I didn't own slaves. I'm not, I didn't do that. Why should I be guilty for what my ancestors did? So there's a lot of that kind of attitude is unpacked in a really interesting and exciting and provocative way in this book about white fragility. So I have some quotes here. We haven't really done it this way before, but I want to turn over the floor to Jamey, and Jamey and I were just going to kind of have a discussion. Then we're going to get to some other quotes from the Baha'i Faith, as I mentioned before, and I'll just repeat it again because it's very worth saying. There are many writings and teachings in the Baha'i Faith about the elimination of racial prejudice. So we don't want to just speak about the problem itself. We want to move into the solution, which Baha'is believe there is a spiritual solution. So let me turn it over to Jamey. As I said, Jamey's a very well-known, respected music producer, composer, and Baha'i. We've been friends a long time. Like I said, he's been a guide and a help, and I really want to hear his story and lift up his voice as much as possible. People have had an awful lot of decades of middle-aged white men yammering at people, and I'm fitting right into that stereotype. So I want to absolutely make sure that we're hearing from him and everyone else on the line tonight. So Jamey, you there's many questions I want to ask you and stuff I want to get into, and I know you have a lot to say on the topic, but let me start with this. Your mother was white, your father was African American, and you grew up in the South in the 70s and 80s. And
grew up here.
Well, you were in Tennessee before, right?
Yeah, I went to school in Tennessee a little bit, back forth, but here has always been home base. But anyways.
Okay. So can you just, I'd love to hear a little bit about your history and background and what perspective you have given your history.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. Before I answer that, let me just share a couple things that come to mind as listening to you, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is I acknowledge that this topic is not always the most fun topic. Being raised in a family where my father is Black and my mother is white, and having white aunties and uncles and cousins, I have kind of an inside view of an intimate view of what it was like for people who were good, loving people who believed in the equality of all people, but yet still carried this stuff, and how uncomfortable it was for them. A lot of Black people maybe don't have some of that intimate knowledge, I don't want to say knowledge, but experience, because they weren't raised with some white folk. I'm no expert on anything, as you know, but we, of course, a lot of us who have life experience have some things to say. And the first thing I want to say that's most important is when we are discussing this, if we can, for the next little bit of time, whatever it is that we think we believe, you're welcome to believe that all you want, carry it with you throughout your life. But if for the next little bit, you just put that on the shelf, allow ourselves to kind of be open to some new ideas. We can throw them away in the trash can. But that is where like growth in anything happens, right? When we just allow ourselves a moment to listen, to share with an open mind and heart. That's first thing. Second thing is believing, and I'll answer your question with this thing. So I was raised in a family that Baha'is, who are, I want to say this so many times, who are wonderful, amazing Baha'is, amazing people, love God, are well-to-do. They love all things Black, as I like to say. And yet, I experienced a lot of pain and prejudice in my life growing up from some of these very same people who love me. I know they love me. But there was so much that they didn't know, maybe some stuff they did know but didn't want to look at. And what I've experienced and what I see a lot of us in the world doing is we believe in something so much, And we say we believe in these things, and in our heart we think we believe them. But believing is never enough, right? It's about how we practice these things. Believing means nothing. I believe in eating well. I believe in exercise. But at the end of my life, or the end of 10 years, I can say I believed all I want. But as my body is decaying, I can't just say, well, I believe in eating well. I believe in exercise. It's like, doesn't matter. Did I eat well? Did I exercise? That's all that matters at the end. Believing is like almost for the birds. I'd rather have someone not believe in something and practice it, right? Practice eating well and don't believe in it, than the other way, because just believing doesn't really do anything. So a lot of us carry these tendencies, prejudices, whatever it may be, and we think believing is enough. So maybe if we can consider those things. And my family believed in these things. I mean, so much they preached them and talked about it. And yet in practice, not all the time, I don't want to demonize them or shame them in any way, but there was so much happening that in practice wasn't happening, that I was experiencing. Did you have another question with that? Did you answer another question that I didn't get to? No. Okay.
No, it was
Cool. Let me say one other thing, and then you can I got a few things to yell at you about also, Rainn, but I love you. The other thing is this whole idea of privilege. I've been talking to so many people, and maybe many of you who are listening to us, you hear someone say white privilege, and it fuels this feeling, because it feels like me or someone else is saying you're undeserving, that you haven't earned what you have. And I want to make it clear that by saying somebody has white privilege, in no way am I saying they don't deserve it. The privileges that white people have, you should have. Thank God you have them. We are here on this planet to better our lives and to have joy and to have opportunities. And the fact that white people have it, and I say you have that privilege, is in no way an indictment on your character or your rights. But for some reason, when we say it, it makes us feel so we get defensive, and then we can't listen. We can't understand that, oh, there's a point to this. All I'm saying, and what people generally are saying, is that you have a privilege that I'm not afforded that much. We don't argue that like when you become a senior in 12th grade, right? You have privileges that 10th graders don't have. And when someone says you have privileges, you don't get defensive, right? You don't say, no, I don't. No, I don't. Or when my son turns 16 and he gets his driving privileges and the 14-year-olds don't, he doesn't get defensive when you say you have driving privileges. Privileges are not something that most of the time we get defensive about, because we feel like we have a right to them. We don't feel bad about them. There's no shame in having those privileges. But for some reason, when I say, you have the privilege to use that water fountain, and I don't, without being looked at weird. All I'm saying is that you can do it without people looking at you side-eyed, and I can't. And that's a privilege that you have that I wish I had, and that I should have. Or I'm a golfer, and I go to golf courses, not so much as much now, but so much I would go and not allowed on them. Privilege that Rainn has, that I didn't have. It's a white privilege. It's not a bad privilege. Thank God you got it. Can I have it too? That's what Black people really are saying. So I don't want you to feel, for anyone who feels conflicted about this and maybe takes offense to it, and I see many people that seem to and get defensive, we're just acknowledging that you have a privilege that we should have as well. And maybe you don't have to feel as bad about it when looking into it.
On that, you have such a good explanation, as well as the same kind of white fragility in response to the whole Black Lives Matter versus all lives matter. Maybe you could address that.
I have a great example. Tell me which one I have. I love it. Tell me something smart I said before.
You said so many things about this topic.
Yeah.
That's like saying, if you say women's lives matter, it's like, oh, that doesn't mean men's lives matter. Or you say poor people's lives matter.
It's like the only one, maybe there's one I'm missing, but for the sake of my thought, it's like the only one there's so much defensiveness about. So if we have a school, and let's say the 8th and 9th graders have great teachers, and historically throughout the school, and the 11th and 12th graders have great teachers, but for some reason, the 10th graders are overlooked. They're not given good teachers, they're not given computers in their classes, and their room is way in the corner and no one really pays attention to them. If one day, after some time, the 10th graders were like, 10th grade matters. Nobody would be like, well, all grades matter. They'd just be like, 10th grade matters. Hello, we need things. We need some of these resources like all the other classes do. And if no one was listening, and then they started standing in front of the school saying, 10th grade matters, 10th grade matters, please. Who would then be like, all grades matter? Nobody would. We would all embrace it. Even the 12th graders, even a 12th grader that said, well, actually, when I was in 10th grade, I don't agree with you because I was in 10th grade and we had great teachers. They can have that perspective, but they wouldn't then stand and then deny them from expressing it and then feel offended and then say all grades matter. Nobody would do that. I think that's with all walks. No one does that except for some reason in this, because I think when we say Black Lives Matter, people who aren't Black are feeling like, well, you don't matter more than me, or it's like this thing, and you have this cognitive dissonance, like you feel uncomfortable. There's some shame or acknowledgement about it. So instead of looking at it, sometimes what you do, or what we all can do, is we create a narrative that we're comfortable with. And I'm comfortable with all lives matter, and I can support that. So then we stand. I just want us to be open to the idea that, again, we know this, it's simple language. Black Lives Matter only means Black Lives Matter too. That's what it means. 10th grade matters. Children matter. But we're not saying two right now, because we're saying, please just look. We're making the point that Black Lives Matter. Can you look and can you acknowledge that, and can you help us through this? Maybe it doesn't make you feel, or all of us feel, as defensive with it, and we don't have to claim. And when someone says to me, all lives matter, when I say Black Lives Matter, most of the time, maybe not with you or you or you or you, whoever I happen to be pointing and looking at, most of the time, I feel discredited. I feel like you're trying to tell me, yeah, but that's what it feels like. And I think, honestly, that's oftentimes what people mean.
Thanks, Jamey. That's super clear. Since we seem to be kind of hitting some of these main points of the conversation these days, and one of them that things that I've posted, people like, stop trying to make me feel guilty. I never owned slaves.
Yeah.
Love to hear your thoughts on that. And then I was thinking about my other aspects of my white privilege. There's one aspect was I went to theater school in the 80s to learn how to be an actor. And in the acting training programs and in the theater, there was never any cultivation of actors of color in terms of, giving training and opportunities and open doors to that population. So it was for rich kids, essentially, and rich white kids mostly. And when I was started in the 80s was the first time there was some diversity that was starting to trickle in to a lot of theater productions in New York, especially like Shakespeare plays and classical plays. And there was a whole school of thought of people that you shouldn't have a Black person in a Moliere play or a Shakespeare play because Black people wouldn't have been in the court of Shakespeare, or wouldn't have been in 18th century France or what have you. The reason I'm bringing this up is part of my white privilege was to be able to be educated in the theater and get training and have jobs open to me where I was absolutely welcomed and encouraged as a young white male. Whereas if I had been a young African-American male, my journey would have been much more difficult on many, many, many different levels. I mean, not to even mention level of education and economics and all of these other things. So the doors were just open wide for me to come be a professional actor. It was still a difficult as hell journey. I suffered, I struggled, I was broke all the time. I was having to hustle to get work. I did theater for 9 years and never made any money at it. And But so I guess I never owned a slave, but I benefited from the system that was set into place hundreds of years, 150 years after slavery. I was still benefiting from that same system of oppression and subjugation, economic and cultural and otherwise. And so, no, did I own a slave? Of course not. I didn't own a slave. But did I benefit from the same kind of system? Absolutely, I did. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on that and to that kind of knee-jerk response about.
Yeah. Well, I'll first say that there are people much more qualified to speak about that than I, some brilliant, brilliant minds. And so I'm not an expert on this, other than I hear you. I understand. Yes, Rainn, you did not own slaves. My people's oppression is not because of you directly. But the fact that you can acknowledge that these things existed. My great-grandfather was a slave, born a slave. My great-grandfather. Think about all your great-grandfathers, you know them. My great-grandfather. My great-great-grandfather was indeed one, right? And many people benefited from them being slaves. Rainn, your family, not directly but maybe indirectly, and in some ways directly, has benefited from it. And when you can at least look at that and say, okay, I can see that. Doesn't mean I'm to blame for it, but I can see it. I don't have to be defensive over it. I'm not blaming you, Rainn. But if you can recognize that, then maybe you can say, well, I have opportunities afforded to me generally because of that you aren't because of that. And how can I don't want to say it, make atone for it, because exactly we're not saying it's your fault. But if you ignore it and then look away and then keep denying it and say, nah, that didn't happen, and just pick yourself up from your bootstraps. Now you're saying, okay, I did benefit from it. I don't care to make anything different. And we're seeing a lot of that. So that defensiveness, I get, man, we are people that don't want to be told we're bad, and we're all trying to do good. Even the worst people in the world are still wanting some of the same things we all want, right? So I understand what it does. But how can any healing and how anything progress if we can at least just reflect, look at it, not be defensive, and own? And I think that's oftentimes that knee-jerk happens, and then of course we're all fuming at that point.
So you had talked before, Jamey. Our friendship goes back a long ways. We've been through a lot together. We've had a lot of ups and downs.
A lot of it. Yes, we have.
And together. And what would you say for me, just friend to friend, in front of an audience of 129 people?
Oh, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time.
Here you go. What have you said, like, what have my improvements on my vision and action in this realm been? And what do I need to look at? What have I missed, and where do I need to keep going? I'm open to hearing that.
Yeah.
Because I think this kind of discussion is valuable for other people to hear.
Yeah. So I'm going to reiterate.
I'm not going to listen to you one bit.
I know you won't.
I'm not going.
I've experienced that for years and years, that you won't listen to me. But put that aside. Listen, I want to be clear. I think I'll probably preface this with everything that I say. I'm not the expert, right? I'm not the one that's supposed to sit and judge what you are doing and what you're not doing. It's between you and God. However, we are when we see each other as brothers and sisters in the world. We want to help one another see, and the best we can. I need guidance all my life with different things. Here's what I've seen in you, Rainn, and some of my other friends. Ready? I see you care. This is what a lot of people do. We care. Like right now, the world is outraged. So many people are seeing what's happening. So everyone's going, this is an analogy I'll use. They go like, I'm tired. I want to do something. So you go to the Home Depot, you go get a big sledgehammer or a jackhammer, and I'm going to knock this wall down, man. And I'm going to do, and you're like feeling, outraged, and you want to get the biggest hammer you can get. This grand gesture. The problem is, while that's wonderful, that's not sustainable, right? You can't carry a sledgehammer with you everywhere you go. You get fatigued, you get worn out, and in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you put the sledgehammer, and then it goes in your closet, or it goes in your garage, and then there it is, and now you go on. And I see that a lot. So what I've seen in some of my close friends, intimate friends, is this very way of thinking. Big grand gestures, and then the sledgehammer gets in the closet. And then thank you for the sledgehammer, that's great. But the ones that go and get a chisel, a chisel is like a little thing that you just like, and you have a hammer and you knock away at stuff. A chisel, you can keep in your back pocket with you. You can take it with you. You can do it every day. You can get a little bit of dirt off the wall. And this is like your life and your decades and with your children. And this is all sustainable stuff. So I'm more interested and more impressed when we as a society do things like that, because they're sustainable, and then you start to build muscle, and then it becomes a part of your routine. It's like daily prayer. If you say short prayers or do it a little bit throughout your day, that's sustainable. If you're like, I got to read 3 hours a day, you're going to do that for a week, and then you put it down, and then now you're distant. You're not engaged. But if you just take bite sizes and consistently take bite sizes, then they're a part of your life. So, Rainn, with you. Sorry, I went off on a little tangent, but here's what I'm going to say. And you're going to be a little embarrassed, but I love you. I've always said to you, for instance, the way that we see it is it has to be witnessed in practice. So you have a company. If your company does not look different, if it's all white people in the executive positions, deserving white people, wonderful, amazing white people, and a few black people or a few people sprinkled in there, generally in lower roles. And if your heart is changing and you believe it, but in your life, nothing looks different, well, then how the heck would any other business look different? Why am I yelling at Target and yelling at this company and this company and these companies and my local things to do things different? But my own best friends' companies don't look different. Yeah, and then like I talked to you one time, Rainn, you told me there was a black person in this particular position. What about the leadership positions? Maybe there are, so forgive me if there's some changes in these things, but what I've witnessed over years is an intention and a belief, but the practice. So maybe some of your resumes that you go through to fill this position, you didn't find anybody. Well, then go to Howard, then go to this location, so you can get the voice of someone someone that's black in your company, that can now start to have influence and grow. If we start doing those things across. I have another friend, filmmaker, beautiful. He was doing this, I won't say his name, but I love him. He's a dear, dear brother. He was doing a video, a PSA for something. He showed it to me. I was like, it's beautiful. Why is there nobody of color in it? He was like, well, I was like, there's no one in color of it. Why'd you do this? It like represents so much. He was like, well, we had to film on Friday, and everyone that responded that was of color couldn't do it till Saturday. It's like, well, then change the day. It's like, well, I couldn't. If it was important to you, brother, if it was important, you would have changed it to Saturday. You just would have. But so until that looks different, until my brother's companies, like you, Rainn, and such, look different, visibly different, and are people in those positions, then it's just belief without any real practice.
Yeah.
And action.
And I will say that I remember you calling me out on that before, and I defensively said, well, we have the leadership positions are like 80% women, which is unlike any other production company.
It is indeed.
But you're 100%.
And some of my favorite women too, by the way. Beautiful, amazing, wonderful people.
But however, you're absolutely right. And I think Soul Pancake would have, it's a little different now, but we would absolutely have benefited tremendously by having more diverse voices in on the ground floor to help us grow and develop when we were starting off. And, you know, frankly, one of the topics that we missed out on, I mean, we did the Kid President series of videos and stuff like that, but we didn't address race the way we could have and should have, especially during the early few years of starting out. And that probably due in some respect to not having made made it a priority to have diverse voices as key hires early on. So
and yet, I mean, Soul Pain Keg has done such amazing things. So it's not to discredit, like, this is where sometimes people get defensive. It's like, well, I did this and this. Yes, so much. But if we acknowledge there were some blind spots, it's not an indictment on my character or my company. If you just look at it, and then you can, like, you know, take some of the smudge off those blinds that gave you blind spots, and then we can move forward. But it does require that, you know, it does require that.
do you like my haircut?
No. No, it's the worst one you've had.
Go to the, no.
It's horrible.
So I want to segue a little bit to, we've been going for a little bit now, haven't we? God, it's already been 40 minutes. I'm going to segue to a little screen sharing and get to some quotes. And then I'd love to talk to you, Jamey, about some Baha'i spiritual perspectives on the issue. We could continue this conversation for another 3 hours.
Of course, sure.
I'd love to, and maybe we can have part 2 and do that. But for now, I'm going to share my screen here, because I think it's important to move towards solutions. One thing I want to say is that, you know, in the United States, the country eliminated slavery. The country passed the Voting Rights Act. The country passed Brown versus Board of Education. You know, eliminated Jim Crow laws, right? So there's been a lot of legislation. We elected an African-American as president. There's been a lot of, like, political steps that have been taken, all super important and crucial, not dismissing them at all. We need justice to be served in the legislation of the land, no question. But has racism gone away? Has it even dipped down at all? I don't know that it has. So we as Baha'is, and I know there's people from other faith traditions too, and I know they feel the same way, look at potentiality of spiritual tools to tackle issues like racism, because a kid is not born racist. A kid is not racist at 2. They're not racist at 3 or 4. They're racist when they're old enough to start witnessing racist behavior on the part of their parents and relatives and family and friends, and start parroting that. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all of a sudden you have some racism. So it's ingrained into the human heart. It's taught. And that's where it lives, in that condition of otherness, me versus them, me and someone else. I see this person of this cultural background as different than me. And by the way, it's not just in the United States. You can go to any country in the world and you'll witness outrageous racism, classism, tribalism, differentism, otherism. I want to share some quotes from the son of the founder of the Baha'i Faith, Abdu'l-Baha. God, as I told you before, listeners, this topic is central to the teachings of the Baha'i Faith. So there's thousands of quotes about the elimination of racial prejudice. Here's just 2 ones to just whet your appetite. God maketh no distinction between the white and the black. If the hearts are pure, both are acceptable unto him. This is by Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith. God is no respecter of persons on account of either color or race. Inasmuch as we were all created in the image of God, we must bring ourselves to realize that all embody divine possibilities. Abdu'l-Baha goes on to say, the diversity in the human family should be the cause of love and harmony, as it is in music, where many different notes blend together in the making of a perfect chord. If you meet those of a different race and color from yourself, do not mistrust them and withdraw yourself into your shell of conventionality, but rather be glad and show them kindness. Jamey, I'd love to get your thoughts on these quotes. And I want to say, and then we'll get to some hard-hitting Shoghi Effendi quotes, but I want to say one thing that I learned from you that really moved my heart and has changed my life. We did traveling through the South together. Remember that one tour, and we went and spoke at the Texas Baha'is School, and then we went to I had some speaking dates and you had some music dates, and we kind of tooled around together. Everywhere we went, Jamey, whenever he saw a person of color especially, but it didn't really matter their skin color, someone in a quote unquote menial job, the janitor, the busboy, the hostess at a restaurant, the guy mopping the floors, the clerk, the parking lot attendant, he would always be like, hey man, how you doing? Hey, how you doing today? And give a smile and share a smile and say, how you doing, brother? And this really moved me. And I realized, like, did I own slaves? No. Is it part of my white privilege that I so easily and too easily dismiss people in those positions? How easy it is to go into a restaurant, be like table for two, ignore the Hispanic busboy or dishwasher or the person parking your car or person mopping the floor or whatever. And that, what can I do? What's an action item? What's a chisel? As Jamey had said before, what's a chisel? Is to reach out to every person, especially the people with black and brown skin who are in those positions, and give them your heart, connect with them, love them, show them that you see them, you witness them, and connect with them. And I've really done that ever since, and you kind of showed me the way on that. So I'd love to hear maybe a little more about how you do that, why you do that, and see if these quotes, what they bring up in you, Jamey.
That's sweet to say, Rainn. I'm not super conscious of doing that, although upon reflection, I know that I do that. Well, being someone, as I mentioned before, raised in a family that's mainly white, and oftentimes not seen. And if I was seen, it wasn't seen for who I was, but rather like we don't see color, and we're all kind of like these quotes, which is beautiful. I love that you mentioned God maketh no distinction between the white and the black. If the hearts are pure, both are acceptable unto him. So these are the words of God that I think he's taught us throughout the beginning of time, that we are all equal in his sight. And specifically, we're talking about white and black. And going back to this idea about believing is not enough. So what we oftentimes do is we cite this, and then we hide behind that as if that's enough. And I know that's not enough, because there's daily practice that we have to do. And so when I see people in certain positions that I know are overlooked, I have prejudices of my own, that I have to be mindful of, that have creeped in, that I've learned. And one of the ways I combat them is when I am faced with it, to do something, to act loving, to see them, to engage, to put myself to put us on the same level, not as if I'm this and you're that, even if it's class and not race. So I think that's born from that, my own experience, wanting to be seen, wanting others to be seen. And the Baha'i quotes in these ways have certainly given me these, the inspiration to do so, the understanding that ultimately, in the big picture, race is a made up thing. In the sight of God, we're all equal. There is no real race except for one race of humanity. But since they are made up things that have now become tangible and we have to then deal with something that's fake. But we're forced to deal with it. So these quotes are what allow me to give me the big picture. You know, we have a short-term goals, and then we have the big goal. The big goal is that we want our body to be healthy. We have to start to eat right. We have to be spiritually right. We have to, and if we do all these things wonderfully and perfectly, then we're good. So, and the ways that I know how to do that, and I think you too, as Baha'is, is we know that there's ways to do that that feed the body well, the body of humanity, which is being connected to God, teaching children, being engaged with the junior youth, praying, seeing our likenesses instead of our differences, having elevated conversations with one another, right? Removing the rust from off the heart. These are ways that we know that get us to the promised land, so to speak. But in the meantime, we can't just only do those things. We know that there's little surgeries that need to happen along the way. We have to eat right and do things for the body, but every now and again we get a broken arm or something, and we can't just say, eat right, that'll fix it. It does require attention, specific attention, which is maybe what these actions are right now, like the protests or going to try to change policy and things of that nature, changing your companies and all of these things, right? We need little surgeries like that to happen while we're also feeding. But the Baha'i Faith, for me, gives really the blueprint for the best way to live ultimately, and practical ways to get there. That's what those quotes say to me.
Yeah, thanks. And the second quote there, which talks about unity and diversity, about how diversity is something to be cherished. And these were teachings brought by Baha'u'llah at the end of the last century and Abdul-Baha at the beginning of this century. This was incredibly outlandish viewpoint to say that diversity is something to be prized, cherished, cultivated, and honored. And now we're starting to hear kind of this Baha'i teaching from 100, 150 years ago brought out in the workplace about how incredibly beautiful. People say, "Oh, I don't see color," and they used to say that, "I don't see color," which is a preposterous thing to say. It's like, see the color, see all the incredibly beautiful colors, the colors from Africa and Asia and South America and the Pacific Islands and Mongolia and all the different cultures and strengths and beauty that those different cultures and different kind of physical looks bring, all the different beauty that brings. So unity and diversity is one of the pillars of these teachings on race in the Baha'i Faith. I want to move to some more hard-hitting quotes. So forgive me, people, I know some people here probably know very, very little about the Baha'i Faith. They're like, "Oh, I heard the guy who plays Dwight is going to talk about race on the Zoom." So who knows where you all are at? But we're gonna fast forward to a graduate level kind of course on some conversation about race by a man named Shoghi Effendi, who was the center of the Baha'i Faith, the leader of the Baha'i Faith for many decades in the earlier part of this century, in 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. And he wrote very specifically about racial prejudice a great deal. And he wrote a book, it really was a very long letter that was turned into a book called The Advent of Divine Justice, that really delves into this issue. He calls it the most vital and challenging issue for the United States, and predicted back in the 20s and 30s that the streets would run red with blood if this issue was not dealt with and solved. And he has some really powerful quotes I wanted to share with folk. I'd love to get your thoughts, Jamey. As to racial prejudice, the corrosion of which for well nigh a century has bitten into the fiber and attacked the whole social structure of American society, it should be regarded as constituting the most vital and challenging issue confronting the Baha'i community at the present stage of its evolution. The ceaseless exertions which this issue of paramount importance calls for, the sacrifices it must impose, the care and vigilance it demands, the moral courage and fortitude it requires, the tact and sympathy it necessitates, invest this problem, which the American believers are still far from having satisfactorily resolved, with an urgency and importance that cannot be overestimated. He then goes on to say, every differentiation of class, creed, or color must automatically be obliterated and never be allowed under any pretext, and however great the pressure of events or of public opinion, to reassert itself. If any discrimination is at all to be tolerated, and Jamey, I love this sentence, if any discrimination is allowed to be tolerated, it should be a discrimination not against, but rather in favor of the minority, be it racial or otherwise. He then goes on, and he has this very direct couple of paragraphs of a call to action for the races. The one for the white people is, I find, especially relevant to today's conversation. And it's something that I've studied a lot and looked at, and that first quote I had is, let deeds not words be your adorning. I want to have this be in my deeds and not just my words. Let the white make a supreme effort to abandon once and for all their usually inherent and at sometimes subconscious sense of superiority, to correct feeling a patronizing attitude towards members of the other race, to persuade them through their intimate, spontaneous, and informal association with them of the genuineness of their friendship and the sincerity of their intentions, and to master their impatience of any lack of responsiveness on the part of a people who have received for so long a period such grievous and slow healing wounds. A lot of powerful stuff in here. Before we get to the questions, Jamey, do you have any thoughts?
Thanks for sharing that. That is, what you just read is something that it's better coming from you than me, that's for sure. Yeah, I have one thought that makes me want to share. I know that white people experience struggle. I know that white people have been hurt by police. I know that white people have to work hard for what they get in a lot of circumstances. I know that there are poor white people. I know that there are white people that are marginalized, that are overlooked, that don't feel seen. And I challenge you really to find many Black people that don't know that or see that. So in no way do I want people to feel that you don't deserve what you have.
You know that because you've seen 10,000 movies about white people and their struggles.
Sure.
Over the course of your life.
Sure. And I know many people, and I know white people that have been hurt by systems and overlooked, but not because you're white. Not for that reason. And when we cite the circumstances and the more isolated events to discredit people that have been systematically hurt, there is not, you're going to find maybe one or two, but I'm hard pressed to think that you could find someone Black that doesn't have stories of daily or weekly things that they've felt and had to deal with discrimination-wise simply because they were Black. And I don't know if white people have that same. You've had horrible things, and of course someone's son died at the hands of a police officer, or didn't get into a school and was accepted and got fired, and all kinds of things, which should not have happened. But I don't know if that's hurt the white people in general as a race of people or as a group of people as it has this. And this is why we're bringing attention to it constantly. I keep reiterating these points because I don't want you to feel discredited and then have to feel this. So maybe if we can separate those thoughts and just know that we're saying this is happening to us so much more, and it doesn't allow us to fully have a voice and our rightful place. That's really where it's at. And maybe that doesn't have to make you feel so bad embracing that concept and that we're dismissing your struggle as well. I thought I just wanted to say that. Rainn, as we go on to questions or whatever else you wanted to say.
Thanks, Jamey. Let's do some questions. And Mateen June, how do I make you host again? Is there something?
Yeah, go back to panelist, the area of panelists, and just click on more under my name and just hit make host.
Oh, okay. Mateen, more, make host.
There it is.
Boom. Change
that.
host. Boom.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You don't understand how much clarification this has put on everything. Jamey, thank you so much for the examples. I believe so many have been heartfelt to these moments, explaining the grade school. That just cleared everything up for me. Thank you so much. And Rainn, for joining every single time. I love you, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Do you really love him? No, I know you love him. Do you like him?
I like him. I love him. I like everything above. Everything positive, I'm with it.
Mateen and I go way back. We've done a bunch of these together back when he was a wave at Pepperdine.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get in. If anyone has questions now, if you look at Rainn and Jamey, the Q&A section, people have written large, questions down. If you'd like to answer
on the Q&A there at the bottom.
I see it.
So also, guys, if you want to raise your hand, so I know if you have another question to ask, I would like to bring you guys in. I want to actually show your face as well. So just start raising your hands. Thanks.
I like this one at the bottom from John Pills. I'd like to answer that live. John Pills, P-I-L-Z. And Jamey, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. How do normal white people become a part of the solution? What can white people do who can't just hire people of a different race tomorrow after learning all this? So we were talking about the example of having Soul Pancake and being able to hire diversity hire. So what can white people do? I guess if people also are in the chat, they can type in their thoughts there. But Jamey, do you have anything come to mind? You were talking about using the chisel. What are some ways that white people can use?
Well, I'm real careful with this because everybody on the planet is different, has different skills. And you don't want to compare one person. Yeah, so I did use the example of like Rainn, hire more people. And I love this question that someone else doesn't have a company. So our chisel all looks different and can't be compared to another. And I don't know as a Black person if I can answer that for you. And I think this is important. Black people, oftentimes, one of the things that we have to do is fight for our rights, hope that somebody listens, scream when someone doesn't listen, throw a little tantrum because no one's listening, and this has been going on for so long. And then finally someone's willing to listen. And then they ask me, now can you teach me, and what can I do? And at that point, I'm a little tired. And you find this a lot with people that have been caring a lot. So your question is beautifully asked, and I love that it is there. But I challenge you maybe to read a few books, have conversations with maybe other like-minded people of yours that want to do something. And it's like, what is it that we can do? What are some tangible ways? Because just that practice of discussing it with others, you start developing what your chisel will look like, and not just following someone else's directive, which is not sustainable. You find your own. This is not a cop-out answer I'm giving to you. I really think this is how we develop in anything, with prayer, with life, with being married, children. If this is something that you really want and care about, investigate it, read some things, discuss it with others that are like-minded. That's what I got for you.
Thank you. Who are all these other people? Who's Caitlin and Catherine and Daly? What's happening? Who are you guys? Does this mean you have questions, or you're just
I'm just throwing them in here because they really wanted to be a part of the conversation.
Oh, great. Good. Great to see your beautiful
faces here.
Yeah, great to see your beautiful faces. Thanks so much. There's another question.
Is there a reason why they're all women? No men in there? There's no men here? Only
yeah. Women? Male lives matter.
Look, they're all. Who's Martina? Are you the one picking somebody? Pick someone with it.
I'm just randomly picking them. It just happens that they're all women.
Yeah, it just all happens to be they're all attractive young women, Mateen. What's happening here? Here's one I would like to. There's a lot of great questions, Jamey, coming in. If there's one that you see on that Q&A on the bottom. Anonymous attendee says, Abdu'l-Baha says humanity is one kind, one race, but everyone says not to think of everyone as one race because you're saying we don't see color. Abdu'l-Baha and Baha'u'llah also going to mention the beauty of diversity. So how does this quote, humanity is one race, come to mind? So, well, Jamey and I both, that's a great question. And we both dealt with that in a way. Race is a construct, right? I mean, if you take off someone's skin, if you're just looking at the organs and the DNA of a human being, you will never be able to tell race. There's no such thing as race. We're all exactly the same, other than some pigmentation. And so it's both things are true at the same time. From a spiritual perspective, we're all souls that are inhabiting human bodies for 80 or 90 years on this planet to learn a bunch of spiritual lessons, to grow spiritual virtues. And then these beautiful, divinely anointed, radiant souls, some of them, like Jamey's, are a little more besmirched and soiled. These souls continue on toward infinite worlds of God to meet our Creator. So we're all the same because we're souls inhabiting bodies. At the same time, we have someone is born into the mountains of El Salvador, someone else is born in the mountains of Vietnam, other people is a Tuvan throat singer from, Turkey. People have different cultures and assets and styles and societies that, while we're here on this planet, need to be celebrated and brought together. And we should see diversity, not only of just skin colors and cultures, but diversities of opinion as a positive thing. God could have made us all have one color skin and have one culture, and that's not how human life developed on this planet. So that's one aspect on that. Jamey, do you have anything to add to that, or do you want to get to another question here?
Yeah, I think you did great.
Okay, thanks.
Specifically, I just happened to come across this one. Coming from a mixed background, do you feel prejudice from both sides of the spectrum, black and white? That's no, is the first thing. No, I do not feel prejudice from black people. I have felt prejudice, so to speak, once or twice, a handful of times. which themselves have been said about us. That's a whole other thing. But no, I have not. Other than few isolated.
To look up here, and I'm going to put here it is. So there's another one saying, I struggle with knowing what action is appropriate to take. This is from Nassim Jabari. Here's a great article I tweeted the other day, and I'm going to put it in the chat. 75 things white people can do for racial justice. It's a great article. It was sent to me by an African-American friend, and it has all kinds of ways to volunteer, to educate oneself locally, etc. So that's a good.
Specifically to me, if it doesn't get too personal, can you please give some examples? It's hard to imagine that you would experience prejudice from people who love you. I mean, I think it's a great question because it speaks to all of us in the world. How many of us love people, but we've treated not well? How many times have you maybe hurt someone really badly, said some things that was hurtful to them that you loved because you were offended or because of this or because your ego or whatever the case is? I think that we see all the time that we can do things that are hurtful to people. In my life growing up, prime examples of family and extended family friends who also believed in this idea of equality and who I know loved me, but also knew how to hurt me. So when they wanted to get something that they wanted or wanted me to feel bad, they would call me the N-word. They would tell me I wasn't as pretty as the next person. They would, if there was something broken in the area, the first person they'd ask was me and not some of the others. There's a whole laundry list of things I can tell you of how we experience it. But I'd like you to just like think about how so much that there can be people that we love. We oftentimes think that, well, if we can do something bad to someone and mean to them, that we don't love them. I think all of us, like racism, there are people that like black people, that have friends and claim that and don't hate them. And yet they have a lot of feelings that are negative, and they say things and they perpetuate behaviors that contribute to this. So maybe, I don't know if that helps, but maybe it's a reflection of how we all can like just know that we can be good people and still do not good things.
So Elena and Marcella says, how about talking about neighborhood redlining and white flight, segregation by where people live, and that black and brown majority areas are right away seen as bad areas. Yeah, and there's, for those who don't know about redlining, it was, 100 years in the making. It still happens today, where basically it was decided where banks would give loans and real estate officers would show houses and properties to people of color. And it helped instigate white flight and kept people of color from being able to get loans and get houses in white neighborhoods. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's redlining in a nutshell. So one of the things about, and again, I'm not an expert about this. I'm a unemployed, middle-aged, very, very white actor. But I think what this question gets to is, yeah, we can rework the system of policing. We can make sure there's more diversity hires. We can provide more opportunities to people of color. There's all these things we can do that are super, super important. But when you start peeling the onion of racism, it gets really deep, and it has to do with education. It has to do with geography. It has to do with economics. It has to do with business models. I mean, in any kind of social issue you can think about has a kind of a racist component. Jamey and I have a friend, Ruha Benjamin, who has a book out called Race After Technology, and about ways that technology is racist because it's created by white people. Like in the airport scanners, beep if African American women are wearing their hair up, which is a super important, to many of them, expression of their culture, and yet they're consistently pulled over in an airport. I traveled with an African American woman once, and she was always pulled over at. Could you imagine every time you're going to get beeped just because you're wearing the hair the way that you want to wear your hair, that is important to you culturally, and it starts to. Anyway, there's more to it than that, but it's just important to see when we look at redlining, what is one thing we can do? Well, we can go into Black and brown neighborhoods, and we can move into Black and brown neighborhoods, and we can invest our money in Black and brown neighborhoods, and we can volunteer our time in Black and brown neighborhoods, and buy food from Black-owned businesses. I mean, there's the whole socioeconomic models have been built on the post-slavery systems, and those systems need to be dismantled, and it's going to take hundreds of years to do this. I'm actually really excited because I'm moving out further from LA to Camarillo, which is about 50% Hispanic, and then it's right next to Oxnard, which is about 80% Hispanic. A lot of very, very poor farm workers, and I'm excited to look for service opportunities in my neighborhood, just a couple miles from my house, because right now I'm in a lily white suburb, where I can be more, integrated with people of color. So that's a good question. And so as you start to unpeel this onion, like I said, it's going to get a lot more complicated.
Can I get one?
Yeah, please.
How do I know when to unfriend a friend who I just realized is a closeted racist? Eschew all fellowship with the ungodly, quote. When do I know I'm not being patient enough when teaching? I wanted to answer that one because I have a lot of friends who I have bumped heads with for years and years and years. Not closeted racists. But I think that term, we have to even be careful when we do that, because no one wants to be called something. As soon as you call me a name or something that I don't like what that means, now it's hard for me to even look at it anymore. Now I'm going to be defensive, and I won't even look at some of my tendencies. So maybe your closeted racist friend, as you put it, does racist things, has prejudices. And if you are a light, this is what we have to know, like in our world, if we see the world as our brothers and sisters, if we see us as one truly, and my sister had tendencies that I disagreed with and that were hard for me to stomach, would I abandon her completely? I would not. That doesn't mean I'm going to have her on my front seat and then I'm going to have her, lead my company and such. But I know that I'm going to try to continue to have influence on her. So I think those of us that are that have vision and that are strong on our roots, when you have friends that are finding their way, to learn how to be a light, not even for them, because oftentimes the people that are closet or that are racist, you're not going to change them. Or anyone that's super sexist and wants to rape women and do horrible things, we're not going to change them. But the kids that are watching, our friends that are watching, right? These people in the middle ground who are like, and they watch you, Borna, I think, who asked this question. They watch how you deal with things, then it has an impression on them. It's not really even about the direct person. Hey, Jerry.
Can I speak?
You're not going to say anything. I saw Jerry. I just want to say hi. Go ahead.
Hi, Jerry. I want to speak to that as well. When I was growing up in Seattle in the 70s, my best friend was Mexican American, John Valadez. He was very popular at our school. And he was a good athlete and dated people and was very popular. And and forgive me for even saying this word, but we called him by the nickname of Spick. Lovingly, jokingly, we thought it would just be hysterical to call him a derogatory name. Were we acting racist? Were we racist in doing that? Yeah. Did we need to be, at a certain point in time, his father was Mexican-American, grew up as a farm worker in Eastern Washington, kind of laid into us and lectured us about that word and what it meant. And I was so grateful for that. So I would say for this friend that may have said racist things or tweeted racist things, who knows? I don't know the backstory here, that I wouldn't, at the same time, I wouldn't dismiss them, and maybe they can be lovingly educated. No one likes to be yelled at or lectured to, but you can, but maybe there's more that can be done before they're issued. So that's all.
And by the way, this is specifically, when I answer that, I'm speaking to people that are white or white passing. I want to make this a point about, and this maybe might speak to what's going on right now as well. To ask anyone that's black to deal with people that are saying racist things, posting racist things. I'm not suggesting that anyone in that position not unfriend them or not be around them. That is destructive. That's more hurt. And of course, we have to protect ourselves. And it's not my job anymore, really, to educate that person. I'm talking to other white people who have intentions, who you might have an ear to them. But, for black people to do it, it's like, and this speaks to like this, even like what's going on right now. I hate that all this destruction is going on. The truth is, most black people, like everyone else, hates to see all this stuff going on. But any of you who may have children or a sibling, or remember yourself when you were a child, right? When you wanted to be heard about something and you asked for something and you were ignored, the next step the children will do is then they'll start like stomping their feet. And then they're ignored because they're hungry or they have a need that needs to be met. Their diaper needs to be changed, whatever it is. And then you kind of ignore them purposely or unpurposely. Then they start throwing their arms, they throw their toys, they throw a tantrum, they start throwing things around the house. And as parents, we look at these children and we're like, hey, stop, okay, stop. Now we can either focus on the tantrum, which of course, hopefully in the future they can learn to not do that. But you can't blame them for the tantrum. You understand that there's a need that's been ignored for so long that their physical feeling is like, ah. And what we're experiencing now is my voice not heard. I love Rainn. Rainn and I love each other. And there's been stuff for years that we've kind of like, nothing blatant, where it's been like, oh, okay, can you not? And there's other people that it's been like, and that's with people who I'm engaged with. And then there's been other people that it's like, can you please just hear me? Can you see it? Can you not deny this? Can you understand this? And for people that have been ignored for so long, it's just a feeling that comes out that is like, I need to be heard. So in no way condoning some of the stuff that's going on, but maybe when you see it, you can frame and understand that there's so much pain and so much stuff going on that you're seeing tantrums, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's maybe we'll do one more question here and then wrap it up. Aaron Hooper says, how do we as Baha'is create content that not only brings awareness and elimination of prejudice or tells stories of people of all backgrounds, but not only gets consumed, but leads people to action and changes culture in terms of entertainment? Well, Aaron, I don't think that there's a formula for that. It's a wonderful thing to strive for, and I would love to hear what Jamey has to say as a musician around this, because music can often build bridges and cause change and uplift hearts in ways that so much other entertainment can't. But the example I always use around this is, I'm going to give two examples. One is in the late 70s, whales were dying right and left. They were almost extinct. Blue whales hadn't been seen in many years. And this guy did an album of whale songs. And this album became a runaway hit. And I forget the name of it. I should look it up who it was. And it was literally recorded whale songs with some like strings and orchestra to it, and creating these sonic scapes of the songs of the humpback whale. And it was a top 10 seller album. People loved it. And they were like, oh my God, these songs are so beautiful, these whale songs. And immediately people were like, I love these whales. I care about these whales. Oh my God. And then they heard, oh my God, these whales are dying. This is terrible. And you hold the whole Save the Whales campaign didn't start out of some ecological protest. It started out of an album of whale song that changed how we view whales and humanity's relationship to whales. And then whales populations have been coming back. Now they're in trouble again. There's a whole other story we won't get into, but anyways, that was an example of like art causing action, but it caused action by hitting people in the heart. Again, no one likes to be lectured to. Another one at Soul Pancake, we did this, oh my God, now I'm blanking on it. There's this kind of dating show that we've been doing recently, and it's very popular, and I'm just blanking on the name. It's like Meet Your Match, or Say Hi, Mister, or Hey, what's your name, or something. I can't remember the name of it, but it's about implicit bias. So implicit bias is something that I've been trying to learn about how we make snap judgments based on people's looks, especially of people of color, and then how we treat them according to those snap judgments. And so it's about implicit bias, but it's done as a dating show. So you sit down and you meet the person, and then they write down things they believe that the other person, oh, he probably eats broccoli, and he probably is a vegan, and blah, blah, or she's probably likes video games, or whatever. And then you realize that people don't have those prejudices that you immediately thought that they had. And that was a really smart example. It was a big hit show. It gets millions and millions of views, which is good for our channel. But in the guise of a dating show, it is tackling this issue. So that's another way to think about making this kind of content. Jamey, any thoughts on how to use the arts to heal racism?
Yeah, how to use the arts. I'm an artist. Obviously, my whole life has been that. I don't know if the arts do it in itself. I think you expressed it really well. I mean, obviously, it's what you can use art as a way to use your chisel, as we're all figuring out which way to do that. Not that anything we're saying is profound, but I don't think
Great.
that.
Well, listen, guys, it's we got 104 people hung in there to the bitter end. Thank you very much for staying. Jamey, this was a really wonderful conversation. I hope we can continue it together. Thank you, Jamey, for being a friend and a guide through this issue. And I hope you'll continue to guide me. And do you have any thoughts before we sign off, Jamey?
I'll say this, that I'm sure that I have said something that everyone doesn't agree with. Doesn't everyone agree with? And I'm sure Rainn has said some things that everyone doesn't agree with. If possible, if we can, like, the things that we disagree with, if we can put those off, again, put them on the shelf for a minute and focus on the things that maybe do resonate, things that we can agree on. and not hold on to the 4 or 5 comments that maybe I made that like struck a nerve. And that's including black people, because I'll tell you what, I don't speak for all black people, because there's another one that's going to have a different feeling about it. And but it won't be that far different, but the way they express it might look different, or this particular thing. And white people that have a different perspective than Rainn and such. But if we can, always, this is the way to growth. If we can find our commonality in the things that we can hear and see and allow that, then that can be part of growth. That's it. And you look great, Rainn, and I'm so happy to be doing this with you and talking with you. And I had a whole thing I wanted to shame you in front of everybody, but I love you.
Do it. Before we
Mateen, any last?
Before we finally end, I think Jamsheed wanted to say something. Jamsheed, are you there?
I'm here. I just wanted to, again, on behalf of the Santa Monica Baha'i community and the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Santa Monica, express our gratitude to you for joining us, both as presenters and also all of those who joined the session. This kind of, some of the comments you made and the progress that we had tonight reminded me of a quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where he said that every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and a struggle, the tireless exertions and passionate concerns of dedicated individuals. And I think those of you, all of us that joined this session will count among those dedicated individuals. And I just wanted to, on behalf of our community and from my own heart, express my gratitude to you. And this was a session I learned, and I appreciate the thoughts that you shared. I hope you will join us again and you let us continue this discussion, this conversation. And to those of you who have joined us, I also want to ask you to stay tuned to what we are doing. We would have a session on the 14th of June, 14th of June on 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the subject for that would be finding meaning in our global suffering. And then we return to subject of race unity, racial unity again on the 28th of June, again at 3 p.m. And we'll have more discussions. And the topic would be achieving racial harmony in America. What do you suggest? All of these, the links to these sessions, you can find them at the santamonicabaha'i.org, the Facebook of Santa Monica Baha'i Community, or on the Facebook page of Sunday Gatherings, which is you can access that by going to Sunday Gatherings, plural, sundaygatherings.com. Again, a million thanks to you, and we appreciate all you did tonight and hope we can continue. Thank you.
Thank you,
Jamsheed.
Yeah, again,
Thank you, Mateen.
thanks again. We would love to do this again, a part 2, even a part 3, with maybe less amount of people so that everyone can maybe participate and show their visual face. But again, thank you so much. This was so awe-inspiring, and I loved it. I loved hearing from both of you. Any last words, and then we can close up.
Mateen, I love gratitude to you as well for all your help with making this happen.
Thank you.
Oh, well, before you go, Jamsheed.
Yes.
It's great to see you.
Wonderful seeing you.
I'm going to share just the 15-second. Jamsheed and I bumped heads one time. We were in a particular situation. Something happened. We bumped heads. And after Jamsheed, my brother, reached out to me, apologized for his role in it, and didn't deflect. And what I want to say to you in front of everybody is, when we do those things and when we can acknowledge when we stumble, healing happens and growth rather than standing in our ego. So I applaud you and thank you for our little bumping of the heads.
Thank you, brother. I love you, and you know that is deep and sincere. So,
yes,
brother, thanks for acknowledging that.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for
So
joining.
long, everybody. Great
Thanks,
seeing you
Paul.
all.
So
Bye-bye.
long. Thank you.